The Property Pod. Welcome to the Property Pod with Moneyweb. The property sector is an ever-changing sector, and in this podcast series, your host Suren Naidu chats to movers and shakers in the property industry.
Hello and welcome to the Property Pod, South Africa's premier property investor podcast. My name is Suren Naidu, and on this weekly Moneyweb show, we gain insider insights from leading CEOs, analysts, developers and entrepreneurs in the country's dynamic property industry. Affordable housing is a major issue in South Africa, and the government seems to still be grappling with it. But the private sector appears to be now increasingly looking to invest and get involved. Recently, issues and opportunities in the affordable housing space were discussed at the 16th annual IHS Affordable Housing Conference. Vanessa Murray, the Divisional Executive for Property Finance at Nedbank CIB, attended and was one of the keynote speakers. She joins me now on the podcast to share further insights. Welcome to the Property Pod, Vanessa.
Hi, Suren, and thank you so much for having me.
Before we get into what your key message was at the event, can you share some of the other issues raised at the event?
Sure. So, I wasn't only an attendee. Nedbank CIB has been a proud sponsor of this affordable housing conference for the last 10 years. And I think what's important, in terms of what we look for out of the conference is it's not just about, fleshing issues. It's also very much about knowledge sharing and about sharing also, I think, the positive kind of stories and trajectory of the sector. The day was very successful. I'm very happy to say that we had over 400 attendees at the conference. It's the highest turnout ever. So we're very happy with that. And I think it just shows the importance of the sector and I guess the growing awareness of it, as a sector to, take note of and deploy capital towards. Some of the panel discussions that we hosted in the day really focused on topics such as, inner city generation. We actually had the Executive Mayor of Johannesburg, Dada Morayo, take part in the panel, and it really looked at exploring how public-private partnerships and investments can, potentially look to unlock growth in Johannesburg's inner city. And so I think that was a very encouraging conversation about the opportunities that are there, if this collaboration takes hold. We also looked at innovation in the sector, and that touched on things like modular construction, how that can actually, reduce the cost of construction. We had a very interesting panel on women leading in residential property, and that wasn't only focused on women in leadership, but also looking at how we, can begin to tackle, transformation at the ownership level, how we encourage more women to take part in it at that level. And then I think the final panel for the day, which was probably the most frightening one, was really around exploring solutions for water scarcity, sustainable living, and the green building standards, by the Green Building Council. I think, what was very clear there is that water is a very scarce resource. And regardless of, our own infrastructural, issues that we have in SA, it's really around climate change and how that's going to impact, water scarcity. And we need to start really thinking about that. So all in all, a great day, great attendance, and very positive about the future for the sector.
All of the issues that you mentioned there affects the broader property industry. Different sectors, water is the new thing with load shedding having receded quite a bit. But were there any particular issues around affordable housing? Was it more around the developer side of the industry, or was it also around finance? Because the gap finance market is a big issue for government, topical issue. I'm not sure if that's up your street, but were there any issues specifically related to affordable housing that were also mentioned or talked about?
So I think it was not really so much the issues. I think obviously in the home loan space, there's been a lot focused on, increasing mortgage access finance, for affordable properties. And all the banks have had that as a major, growth area and looking at ways, to unlock finance. So it wasn't an issue we specifically touched on this year. But I think one of the things that, is becoming clear is that, there's still a large demand supply gap. So obviously, collaboration, this private public sector collaboration is important. And we're looking to, hopefully see more of that in the coming years. I think a very interesting stat that we discussed, and it was something I actually touched on, in my opening speeches as the main sponsor of the event, was the fact that if you look at the SA REIT market, the share of housing, just residential rental stock, never mind affordable housing, represents or comprises 2%, of the gross asset value, right, of the sector. If you compare that to the international REIT markets, I think in the US it's something like 27, 28%, and in Europe it's over 30%. So it just shows you that, residential rental stock on its own, is a major asset class worldwide, and, can be something that I think, takes more importance as, in the future in the South African context. And behind that, we've just had the formation of the SA Multi-Residential Rental Association that was formed last year, which is really looking at focusing, being a lobbying body for this residential rental stock market. A large part of that is obviously focused on the affordable sector. So I think, a lot of institutions as well are sitting up and taking note of the sector and starting to deploy, real capital behind that. So I think this is just set to grow in the future.
Well, that's good to hear, considering government looking to the private sector on numerous fronts to deal with some of South Africa's main issues. You talked about the financing side, and the next question is a follow-up to that. I understand Nedbank has a just over R1 billion green residential development bond and other green financing initiatives that we've covered over the years for the subsector of the property market. Perhaps you want to share some insights on that, because you have already shared some of your messages were in that keynote address.
Sure. So really what the Green Residential Development Bond was behind is really encouraging developers in this residential space to build according to green standards. And the green standard that we, have really taken on board is what's called the EDGE certification standard. And EDGE stands for Excellence in Design for Greater Efficiencies. And what that certification focuses on is measurable savings in three key areas, namely energy, water, and materials. And that the base kind of level of EDGE certification is around achieving a minimum of 20% savings in energy and water and embodied carbon. And I think, what's important behind that is not only the green financing aspect of it from a climate perspective, it's also around, obviously this is about, supporting affordable housing, and that directly leads to reduced utility costs in the form of water and electricity for the end user. So we see that as having a dual impact ultimately. We're happy to say that, we've deployed, fully allocated and just about deployed the full amount of the bond. And out of that, we're able to finance 1,790 units in that bond. It also meant that we introduced 5, developers who'd never developed to EDGE before. We introduced them to it, and they now, are developing all their projects, on that EDGE standard. So we think, that just demonstrates the impact that can be achieved. We are working on further green financing initiatives in this sector and looking at rolling this out, more broader commercially. And I think also very, happy to say that, for us, we do have a tagline that we are the green bank, and we do take this seriously. But we're also happy to say that, we've recently also helped support SA REIT Association in their publication of the SA Sustainability Framework Guide that was recently issued a week or two ago. So it is something that we take very seriously.
Considering you said that the take-up is almost taken up, as it were, and you're talking about future green finance options, would that be in the form of another bond, perhaps double the amount? What are you looking at? Do you have any specifics at the moment?
Not anything I can share specifically, probably not in the, I can say probably not in the form of a bond. And we're looking at, exploring significant kind of funding to help us, do more in this space. It's something, we review along with our sustainable finance solutions team, on an ongoing basis across the bank. What are the finance, instruments that we can access to help us do more in this space.
How important is affordable housing for Nedbank CIB? It seems to be getting more involved in the space because people know Nedbank CIB as a major player in the commercial finance side of the market. I'm not sure if it still is, but it was often touted as being the biggest financer of commercial property. But commercial property hasn't really had a great run in recent years. But on the affordable housing side, can we see Nedbank playing a bigger role in this space going forward?
So I think we've always played a big role in the affordable housing space. In fact, we were the first funder to actually set up a dedicated unit focusing on this as a sector, and that was already about 15 years ago. We were also kind of the first funder to IHS, International Housing Solutions, as a key client in that space. So it's something that we've taken very seriously. You won't always see it filter through, from an exposure perspective, because a lot of the funding that we do, is not only for rental stock, it's also, for development for units that are sold into the end user market. So, there's a lot of churn in that book and in that space. But it keeps us very busy, and it's something that we, will continue to support and, hopefully do even more with, or more for as this sector evolves and grows. And we've really seen that growth. So I think it will, continue to grow and evolve, and we'll be right there, assisting our clients in that space.
Talking about property finance, both on the affordable housing and commercial property space, do you expect an uptick in demand, as it were, considering interest rates and the cutting cycle has begun? I know there seems to be a bit of caution now following the US elections, but it's still expected that the SARB will cut rates in November. So what's your thoughts around this?
So, it all borders around sentiment, right? So I think, we've certainly seen that this year. We saw a very, very slow first half, and the second half has been, incredibly buoyant, probably more buoyant than we've seen it in the last few years. And so I think, post the announcement and of the GNU and, the first interest rate cut, we've definitely seen that translate into, more positive sentiment and actually more transaction flows. So we've had a very strong second half, and it looks like, that'll continue into 2025. We do still expect, we're obviously expecting another further interest rate cut now, and hopefully another one in the first quarter of next year. And obviously, there's a little bit of volatility in the system now, as a result of the US elections, an outcome of that. So, it remains to be seen how many more cuts we can see, but certainly, and I think it's there's been a lot of commentary already and positive sentiment, expressed, by other players in the sector. So I think, we are very cautiously optimistic, and, we're seeing that translating into increased volumes.
And coming back to the broader side of things, as one of South Africa's biggest commercial property financiers, are you seeing more collaboration between the public and private sectors to boost and address some of the issues in the affordable housing space? You talked about Nedbank, what Nedbank's done, but just your general perception coming out of the latest IHS conference.
Well, you see, that was really what the panel centered around the Joburg, inner city CBD was focused on, was about actually, seeing more of that collaboration. I think the outcome of that, panel discussion was that, that's something we need to do more of. I don't think, we've seen enough of that. And I think that has to happen at all levels, at local government level and at national government level. And I think there's a lot of appetite on both sides. to take that forward. Because, as I said earlier, there's still a large demand-supply gap. And there's a lot of great product that's coming into the market, but just not enough, to really address the gap that still exists.
Not going to ask you about this question, but you talked about water a little bit. I'm sure the mayor was questioned a lot about service delivery, considering other service delivery issues in the economic hub, which is an issue in most provinces as well. But just to conclude, Vanessa, you are the property finance executive or a property finance executive at Nedbank CIB. Increasingly, gender equity in the property sector was discussed at the conference. What are your views around this? Because while there is room for improvement, comparatively speaking, my perception is that the property sector seems to have more women execs compared to other corporate sectors in South Africa.
It was a really interesting panel. I think there certainly are a number of women coming to the fore, at a leadership level, across the property sector. And so I don't have the stats to be able to say, how it compares to other sectors. But I think, really the main issue we explored in that panel was more the issue of ownership in the property sector. So you're seeing, a number of female CEOs, CFOs in the banking, from a property finance perspective. You certainly are seeing more women, taking on senior roles, at that level. But I think what we were more concerned with was really, exploring how we can encourage more women to actually, own and start getting more broadly involved in the development space in the commercial property sector. So it was quite an interesting conversation. Why are women, more reticent, to invest? Are they more risk averse than men? Very interesting conversations. But yet, if you look at home ownership stats, women are leading the way there. There's recent stats that have come out that say women by themselves own about, I think it was 38% of private homes, whereas men is just under 30%. If you take women, co-owning with men, women's participation in the private home ownership space is just over 60%. And, interestingly, when we looked at the township property market, the biggest homeowner group in that space is women in their 30s. So it's quite it contradicts itself a little bit. And so I think there's definitely more room to be done around encouraging women to invest more in the commercial property sector and also take part in, from a development perspective. So, definitely still in the early stages and definitely something that, we at Nedbank, would like to explore, along with our clients, which was, something that we had discussed at the panel.
Vanessa, thanks for that last bit. It's very insightful around women ownership. I've heard those stats before, but it seems that women are better with money, so they focus on investing in property. Vanessa, thanks so much for your time on the podcast today. That was Vanessa Murray, Divisional Executive for Property Finance at Nedbank CIB.
Thanks for listening to the Moneyweb Property Pod with Suren Naidu. To listen to more episodes, go to moneyweb.co.za or the Moneyweb app and follow Moneyweb News for daily updates. Follow Suren on Twitter @Suren Naidu for more of his property industry content and other business stories. The Property Pod.